Fletcher is absent.
Andy Fletcher is absent. Did everyone get a chance to look at the minutes? Any changes, updates, amendments? Again, look at once over and didn't see anything. Anyone? If not, can I get a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, let's see. If I can get my updates in here. So the Asheville Downtown Association actually just had its annual retreat this week. We had a great afternoon planning, we had some new board members, and kicked off what looks to be like a very exciting year for the organization. We'll be doing all of the wonderful traditional things that we normally do, the downtown after 5, the holiday parade, all these big things, the speaker series. And I'll have more dates, future meetings as we set them and have more information. But it does appear that we're going to be doing some more pushes and internal work to do investments that we value in our community and downtown. So I think look forward to some exciting updates as we progress. The Parking and Transportation Committee did not meet in December. Did not meet this month in January. We did meet in December just because it fell on the first. December's meeting was a work session about the loading zones. You've heard us talk about it for quite some time, but we finalized the survey and then we embedded it into the downtown census. So if there's a question on the census, if you have a problem with loading zones, it jumps you to another little snippet of survey questions. And we expect to have that information ready in February. I did look at it this morning and there have been about 20 responses and 20 different businesses interested in attending a stakeholder meeting about their issues. And the questions we asked range from how do you experience loading zones, do you have trouble with them, are the sizes large enough, are they too far away, do you have problems with abuse, that kind of stuff. And hopefully we'll get some good information and start tackling that. We will be meeting again on February 5th, and as of yet, we've been hearing some input from the community about predatory towing and private lot maintenance and tuning and things. So there's been a little bit of feedback from the community to maybe talk about that as a committee. So if you have any interest in any of those topics, let me know or come to the meeting February 5th. And that is it for those two committee updates. Ronnie, you want to update us about local living and how you working group?
Yeah, sure. So we met in January and we launched the second annual downtown census, which is a survey of business owners downtown to find out what the issues are, what's going well, what's not going well. We also issued an infographic, pretty easy to read summary of what we were able to do with the information collected last year. So that is on our website, ashevillegrown.com, under the news, and please encourage business owners that you know to take it. It's super, super helpful to guide us in things, just like Sage said, parking, and also issues. And we also like collect information that, what does our business landscape look like? How many are new? What percentage are new businesses? How many have 5 years, 10 years left on their lease? How many have 1 year left on their lease? How many rent? How many own? How many employees are there? What are issues for employees? Is parking an issue? All these things. So really important information, helps to make our downtown a better place to live, work, visit, and looks to hopefully continue to come and become more downtown. So that's, does it live anywhere else, or is AshevilleGrown.com public?
I heard Ash Vegas is going to do a report on it later today. The ADA distributed it. I saw that the South Slope Neighborhood Association distributed it. I know that Kate has been discussing distributing it. We're kind of trickling it out so that it maintains momentum. And we didn't think to put it up. I do actually have a snapshot of the infographic here, which is really attractive. If you see it online, grab it and read it. A couple quick stats are that 1 out
out of 3 businesses that responded, there were 215 respondents last year. 1 out of 3 had started in the last 6 years. 78% of the respondents were locally owned businesses. Some interesting ones that approximately half of the businesses reported that they have fewer than 6 staff. So these are small, stocky businesses really, and they occupy less than 2,000 square feet, which is something we've talked about as far as ground floor retail. We have a plan for maybe keeping out things like H&M stores that come in big boxes. And then there was a long, not just information about who we are, but there was actually 2 pages of information about what was done in response to the survey and how we advocated and things that the city took action on. It's really great information, so please do look for it online or in Ash Vegas later this afternoon.
I do know it's on Mountain Express's bulletin, so even if you just do a Google search for Asheville downtown census, I think you'll be able to find it.
I did want to ask a question, Franzi. I went into the survey and I was going to fill it out, and then I realized it was really geared towards individual businesses. It's not really geared, there were hardly any questions at all if you had an office downtown. So I was wondering if you, in the future, were going to try to track information about offices, leases on offices, how many people work, how many people park on the street, how many park in parking lots or private lots. So I'd love to see us somehow try to capture that information too about downtown. I think it would be helpful to, across the board, to have all those kind of demographics.
Absolutely, and one of the things we're having trouble with is figuring out how to make it short enough that people don't stop midway and get tired of taking it. But the other thing is that the second question, I believe, is what type of business you are, and so we do take that into account, and we do ask questions about parking and employees and things like that. While some of the questions are geared towards maybe first floor or retail, restaurant type businesses, there are plenty that office folks with offices can still answer, and we do put those things together, knowing that if you are in office, some of the questions may not apply to you. So, but that's a great suggestion, and we'll continue to tweak it.
I would just add to that, like co-working as well. I think that goes in that bucket because a lot of people come into downtown that are locals to co-work in these spaces.
Don't necessarily have these space.
Right, and don't have an office to account for, but it actually counts.
And one other thing that we talked about is whether or not we might do a community-wide survey just to see how the community feels about downtown and parking and all these other things. So we'll continue to talk about that. And maybe like we did with voting, we could jump, if you're an office user, you jump to the set of questions.
Yeah.
We'll keep working on it. Thank you. Any other updates from
Goal Week's coming up, February 9th through 16th, and that is, whereas it's during downtimes, and we're going to be collecting all the good events that are happening downtown, but also across Asheville that local businesses are putting on or are involved with. And so you can send that information to me, Franzi, at ashevillepro.com, or you can send it to the Downtown Association. Whoever your contacts are, and we'll create a list. We'll put that list out to the general public in celebration of the local week. And we also have a couple of events. One of our main events is going to be on Saturday the 16th, February 16th. Come on out to the Great Eagle. It's going to be from 1 to 5 in the afternoon. We've got a live band. Families are welcome. Some food, some fun, celebration of our local businesses in the local economy.
Great, thank you. So Andrew Fletcher's not here to update us. Is that why your name is there too?
I can provide an update, but I'm going to suggest maybe that we have Taylor do his presentation first, and then he can leave, and then I'll get to my stuff.
We can jump around, sure. So we're going to skip public space management and downtown update reports, and we'll come back. Thank you, you fell unplugged.
Good call. So Dan's only had 10 minutes, so I'm taking up time on technology problems.
So this is Taylor Lloyd with the budget
to talk with y'all about the budget, our process, and kind of where we're at, where we're headed, and just kind of give you an overview. This is going to be a budget and very brief. I'm going to move pretty quickly, but feel free to stop me and ask questions if you have them. So before we dive in, I just want to kind of tell you about where we've been, where we're going. We had some pre-budget work sessions with council in the fall. Departments spoke with them 3 or 4 at a time to kind of give them a deeper understanding of the issues that they're facing. All of that information, those presentations, and a lot of detailed information is on our website. So if you are interested in a particular department, feel free to check that out. After that, we went to the community and did sort of a similar thing. We had 4 community meetings in October and November. We are getting ready to present all of that information to council later this month. Any feedback that we get from y'all today will be incorporated into that. And then we really get into the budget process proper. We'll have work sessions with council where we share information with them about what we're seeing on the expenditure and the revenue side. The manager will propose a recommended budget in May. The final public input opportunity will be the budget public hearing. Will be either late May or early June, and then we should hopefully, fingers crossed, get an adopted budget in June to start the fiscal year on July 1st, or on July 1st. So before we get into the numbers, just sort of a little bit of scene setting. Asheville is seeing some pretty steady growth. You can see we're sort of in the middle. This is North Carolina cities over 50,000. We're not growing quite as fast as some of the places in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg area or the Triangle, but we're also not losing population. Where you see Rocky Mountain down there has actually lost a little bit over the last 7 years. This, I think, is also impactful for us. Today's our population change. So right now, Asheville's population is about 90,000. We see a net in of commuters of about 45,000. So that's where you see that 50% increase. And what this doesn't take into account are visitors to the city that aren't commuters. So that would be tourists, that would be folks that are coming here to use a hospital or that kind of stuff. That's according to the TDA, another, on average, 20,000, I believe, folks a day. So that's really impacting sort of our services and our infrastructure.
Those TDA, the tourism numbers are not in that group?
Not in that group.
And all those other
That's
cities
just
are
commuters.
reporting just the commuters like we did.
Correct.
If someone was coming into Buncombe County and the city of Asheville to work, there's going to be an overlap for that.
Right.
Another thing I wanted to point out are housing costs. So you can see Asheville's median household income are actually a little under the state and the national average there, but our median home value is actually a little higher than the state and national average, which is probably part of the reason why you see that last one of owner-occupied housing units being a little bit lower. And what that's really kind of telling us is, we have a lot of renters in our market, and it likely in some ways is impacted by those first 2 things. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. And then sort of one example of kind of how some of this stuff is impacting the city. Pavement Condition Index is a rating of our roads across the city. And this is some folks that participate in a benchmarking study that UNC School of Government does. You can see we're sort of at the low end of that condition index, which is not ideal. Some of that is topography, right? Like we have some steep roads. Some of that is weather. We probably get a little bit more snow than Charlotte, Apex, certainly Greenville, North Carolina. But some of that is use. We have heavily used roads, and we're challenged to make the investments to kind of get that up to where we'd like to see it.
Is that just paved roads for driving, or is that sidewalks? also?
Just roads. We actually have there's a separate index that we have for sidewalks. Also, another quick thing, and I won't go into a lot of detail on what Dillon's rule means, but basically the state is we're a creature of the state. The state tells us what we can and can't do. Council does have the authority to set property tax rates. They can set fees for services like sanitation. You can issue debt. That does get approved by the local government commission, which is probably a little bit of a good thing, keeps us from getting into any trouble. But we can't raise other taxes or revenues unless we have specific authority to do that from the legislature. So we're kind of constrained in kind of finding those new revenue sources. All right. right, so to the numbers, our general fund, this year budget's just under $125 million. On the revenue side, a little over half of that's coming from property taxes. I think a little less than a quarter from sales taxes. So I'm going to focus on those two things again really briefly here. Those are kind of our big drivers. The other stuff again is it's sanitation fees, it's park fees, that kind of stuff. So here's an example. If you had a building that looked like that in downtown Asheville, your assessed value might need a little more than $500,000, but just for illustrative purposes here, that's kind of how your tax bill will break out. I don't believe there's any part of the downtown that's not paying all of those taxes. So some places in the city don't have the school, or aren't in the Asheville City School District. So that's what your tax bill looks like. And then if council was to choose to raise the rate by a penny, that would be an additional $500 if you had $500 million property. So sales tax. So for every dollar spent in Buncombe County, you pay 7 cents in sales taxes. 4 3/4 of that gets retained by the state, so that goes into pay for all of the stuff that the state does. I'm going to jump down $0.25 of that is a local option sales tax that's for investments at Baby Tech. And then 2 cents of that gets distributed to the county, which goes to all of the local governments in the county. And in Buncombe County, that gets distributed by the property tax levy. So Buncombe County gets the lion's share of it, that's 75%. That's also paying for schools, fire districts. So that's part of the reason why that's a little bit higher. But you can see of that 2 cents, we're getting 20%, give or take of that. So if you think about that 7 cents and we're getting 20% of 2 cents, it's a pretty significant difference, so that impacts us. On the expenditure side, I think the big thing to note here is really just that we're a service organization. We provide a lot of services. We have police and fire. Those are people driven, and you can see that reflected here as salaries, wages, and benefits being probably about 60% of our total expenditures. Capital and debt's another thing. That's the cost, either loans that we're paying for stuff we've already built or paying out capital to build new stuff. Again, sort of hitting that point, I think the key here is if you look at public safety, fire, police, that's over half of our total personnel in the general fund. A couple other big departments. The other is just, it's finance, it's economic development, planning. But again, the point there being that we have a lot of folks because we are a service-driven organization. We do budget in funds, so we have some like the water fund, because their revenues come in a little bit differently from property tax. They use all their revenues for their stuff. We have 2 funds that get support from the general fund, the Civic Center Fund and the Transit Fund. Civic Center's support has remained relatively flat, as you can see. But we made some pretty substantial investments in transit services, and the bulk of that has come from additional support from the general fund. Although I will say some of it does also come from our parking fund. And then another, again, on the capital side, we saw a big jump in FY14 when council dedicated 3 cents on the tax rate to kind of jumpstart our capital program. And then again, after the passage of the general obligation on referenda in 2016. So we're making some pretty substantial investments in our capital, and that's going to have some impact moving forward. So summarizing, again, we're personnel driven. The cost of healthcare obviously is something that we see driving those costs up. And of course, as we add positions for new services or expanding the programs, that's impacting our operating has really, we've tried to keep that as flat as we can, which is a challenge sometimes. But again, as we make those investments in transit services and things, that's going up. And then the capital investments, not only are those growing, but those are going to have future impacts on our operating as we have to take care and maintain all these assets, these new things we're building. So what that leads us to is this structural imbalance where basically we see our revenues growing at a moderate rate, but our operating, our budget requirements growing faster than that. So every year, the challenge is to try to kind of bend those two lines together so that we have enough money to do what we say we're going to do. So I'd like to point out this is council's vision, and this is kind of one of the things that we use to drive our decision making in the city. I'm not going to go through those in detail. Again, those are on the website. There are goals, several goals underneath each one of those items. And again, that's one of the things that we use to drive our decision making. So in the fall, our CAPE completed a citizen survey, or actually contracted with National Citizen Survey to do a survey of our residents. One of the questions was about community investment priorities, and I pulled out what we got from the 28801 zip code, which roughly parallels downtown. And this list of percentages are the folks that rated it. I'm not remembering exactly what, but basically, it's like a scale. Is this not at all important to very important? So these are the people that said it was either very important or important, something along those lines. But you can see it's kind of the top three there: environment, sustainability, affordable housing development, and public transportation being important. Unfortunately, in my opinion, but not surprisingly, maintenance of public buildings a little bit less important to the community, but that just is what it is. So again, thanks for the opportunity. I know that was really quick. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. If anyone has any feedback on whether they feel like these investment priorities are roughly in the right order, or there's something that we're missing, or there's something that you specifically want to call out within one of those priorities, feel free to look into that as well. Again, we'll make sure that that gets included in what we present to council later this month.
Question, do parks come under public transportation?
I know that discussion.
Yeah, I think
number one priority for a lot of downtown people.
Yeah, we did a similar thing at the ADA's meeting earlier this week, and we definitely heard parking. Where does parking fit in? And I would say, to me, it would fit in the public transportation because it's part of the overall system. You could say if it's in roads, I think it's kind of up for debate, but I think that's something we'll definitely take to council and say that, in talking with this group specifically, that parking is definitely an issue.
I've seen so many fights in parking lots that I might even put it over public safety.
Does anybody get shot at?
I do have a question. The slide that you showed the rising need versus the revenues, is that a scale or is that illustrative only?
That's true.
I was like,
You're listening.
I
That's
figured
why
that's
I
what
said
it was.
and
What
no
are the
timeline.
blue lines there, your dreams,
Um,
the gaps?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I wasn't missing.
That's what we think we need to do, and
It's
versus
one of those
the.
slides that makes it look so dramatic.
We don't do a good job of capturing sort of that total. If we were going to do everything that we think we should, could, and would want to do, what would that cost? Mainly, I would say because one, it would be a scary number, and two, we try to focus on getting a really good number for what we're actually going to spend. But that would be really interesting if we could put some numbers.
Was there any mention this year or attempts at any kind of participatory budgeting? I know it was talked about in the community. I don't know what the city ever.
We haven't rolled out like a specific plan for that. I think, again, that's part of something that we're considering. Council, I think, has directed staff to do more community engagement. That's part of why I'm here now. I will say one of the things that we're hoping to do is do a better job of this in the next cycle and try to get to these groups, like not just commissions, but neighborhood groups and really wherever we can. I think the community meetings we did were good and were a good opportunity to educate folks, but we really like to get some more feedback on those priorities so that we can deliver that information for council so that they have what they think they need to prioritize and make decisions at the council.
Do you have access to these slides?
I can certainly double check. And I will say, this is a very pared down presentation that is similar to what we did in the community meetings. That one, I think this is about 20 slides, and that one was like closer to 48, 50, I think, if I was guessing.
So I have a quick question. The financial requirements, are they based on, obviously a number of factors, but like projected increase in tax revenue, improvements, things like that? Or how do you get to the financial requirements? And maybe that's another day, so that knowing where your revenue is, there's like a pro forma that can be created in the gap.
So I think I'll give you an example of how will answer your question. So that payment condition index is a score out of 100 for how our entire road system is. And Public Works knows, each road, what their specific score is. And ideally, there's a score, and I don't know what the actual number is, where as long as you keep a road above that, you don't have to completely rebuild it. You can keep repaving it, repaving. It's much cheaper than rebuilding. But the reality of the situation is we don't have the resources to repave all the roads that need to be repaved before they get to the point where they need to be rebuilt. So I think that's sort of what we're trying to illustrate here, is to say we've identified that we have these needs. Just to, again, that's not even building new stuff, right? It's maintaining existing assets. And we just truly don't have the financial resources to be able to meet that need.
So it's current use and conditions, not necessarily projected use with conditions.
Yeah, and obviously, that would exacerbate as more people drive on the road. We have more people live here, yeah.
Thank you.
I was intrigued by the cellular center slide. So I guess I just wasn't aware that we are funding the Civic Center in such a big way. And I'm curious now what the naming rights, probably $5 million, right? So the naming rights when US Cellular did that, how long did they buy those rights for?
I don't know the answer to that question. I do know that they're getting ready to renegotiate that.
It's happening now.
Yeah.
It's happening now.
Like right now.
So it could help cover, that's those big numbers.
I think there's an acknowledgement that probably it will bring in. Because I think and I will say that the Cellular Center, from a performance perspective, they've done really well over there the last few years, generating additional revenue, and that's really part of why this has been able to, we've been able to maintain this flat and not have to increase it. Yeah, I think that's something, they're considering as they get into those conversations.
Has the city made plans to renovate the Thomas Wolfe Auditorium?
I think that's another good example of one of those things, a need that we've identified, and we haven't necessarily attached to resources, because it's a pretty big number to be able to do it in the way that they'd like to do it, in the way that it arguably needs to be done. So I think that's part of the conversation that we're having right now, actually internally in the city, of priorities and trying to figure out what we can and can't afford.
Yeah, because I thought the entire roof of the US Cellular Center had been replaced, because I go to the symphony concerts and I notice that there's water leaks again on the ceiling.
Thomas Wolfe is I would say probably not in as good a shape as the arena side of the facility. That's definitely something that we're looking at. They're doing, I think, an assessment actually right now to try to get their arms around what that total cost is.
We can probably give you guys an update on what's going on there. That's just what I can check on that. Sam or Chris.
And just say out loud, I am on that commission, so if there's something to say that you want me to update you on, I can do that. That's great to know.
So going into this upcoming funding year, it seems like we're about to kick it off, right? March, April, May.
We've kicked it off internally.
Internally, right. So will you be coming back around to this commission or anything about how the next year's process is going to go?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I think we'd really like to focus on in the upcoming year is, we sort of did this community education piece, and we want to continue to do that to make sure people kind of understand the framework that we're working in. But I think importantly, if we come ask folks, hey, what do you think? Would be to come back around and say, well, this is what we heard, and here's what we decided to fund as a city, and kind of keep that ongoing process. So that's something that I think, at least in the budget office, we're looking at and trying to figure out exactly what that looks like, and if there are any additional costs associated with that.
Do you think getting at is if we're gonna have a discussion about lodging use in downtown, I'd love to know what the lodging that we do have is producing for this budget.
So, yeah, I think, and I don't know the answer as far as from a property tax. I would imagine that that's something that the county can help us figure out.
Well, and I just heard a presentation specifically from the TDA this week about the other commission, and the way that they explain it in numbers is actually that tax cost deferred by tourism per household. So it's like $1,955 that's deferred off of people who live here and own property from the tourism dollars. So that's the way that it's explained. There may be another way to capture the information that you want, but that's how it's delivered in the presentation.
It would be interesting to also welcome them to share some
Yeah, that would be,
information at the same
So,
time.
yeah, it's a full presentation.
because it'd be nice to know not just how much they're producing, but how much the additional tours are costing us and infrastructure costing.
Right. Okay. Any other questions for Taylor?
All right.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I
And for
appreciate
the
it.
extra push
For
here.
doing more from y'all there.
Okay, so now we are back to the Public Space Management Committee of the Downtown Master Plan updates. Andrew Fletcher is out today, but since I've taken some updates, if you recall, the last meeting, we did vote on and decide the roles that we wish for the committee to have, and they are in your minutes, if you cannot remember. Guess what here, if anybody's connected.
Good morning. As Sage said, this group had decided kind of what entities or affiliations should be represented in that public space management group. So Andrew and I took that and started reaching out to individuals to see if they'd be interested in being a part of that group. And we have basically positive responses from most everybody. We have one or two people that we still need to reach out to. I know this thing has been creeping. It's moving very slow, but I really have faith that once we get our first meeting and get people together and set something up regular, and I think that is what we intend to do, is have something that's monthly. We'll keep this thing rolling. I think, at this point, the idea is to get a public survey out to really get feedback on the various programs and issues that take place in the public space, and be able to develop some guiding principles based on that. And I know once we have Andrew in the group, he's going to do a great job with that group. So I plan to get a doodle poll out probably in the next week or so to everybody who we've talked to so far, and to get that meeting scheduled as soon as possible.
Do you need any support or suggestions from us for these last few meetings, or you guys have some names you already?
I think we're good. There's just a couple people that haven't been contacted yet, but I think that we have a great group. I mean, I'm happy to go for the individuals that we like.
I would love to hear the individuals are sure.
So restaurant owner with outdoor dining, we talked with Charlie, forgetting Hodges from Soccer Remedies, and he is happy to participate. Downtown Business Group representative, we have Megan Rogers. It was a long time ago, and she said she participates.
You're in.
Also, Megan can represent an organizer of outdoor special events. Design professional / organization, we have Mr. Dale from National Design Center. Landscape architect, Guido Rodriguez, and he also is going to be a representative for public art, which Andrew Fletcher kind of serves as well, because he's on the Public Art and Cultural Commission.
He's on the planning board, so
And formerly, is he still on the planning board? I thought he
Yes.
was. Okay.
He's on the planning board entry.
Entry commission.
Great. Downtown resident, hope to talk to you. Peter's in. Homeless advocate, we still need to do outreach on that, and so we have a couple of options, but I just want to hold on that one. Tourism or lodging representative, Andrew was supposed to be reaching out to Stephanie Brown, so I'm not sure. I think that they had talked previously and she was interested in participating. Media outlet, we talked to Mountain Express, and Jeff Oates and/or Susan, who does their distribution, is interested in participating. Our nonprofit representative, again, can be represented by Megan, and someone that helps manage Parks and Public Spaces. I reached out to Julia of Just Folks. I haven't heard back yet, but hopefully she would be willing to work with us. We have a couple backup options on that too. So that's what we're looking at.
It sounds like Megan might cover a few roles. I'd be curious to know if we have like a number of committee members we're going for. If we want one person to cover 3 roles.
Yeah.
Thanks for y'all.
The way I think we talked about it to this point is that it would be workable and, keeping the group to a manageable size, I think will help us with scheduling and just making progress. But once we meet initially, I think that's a good time to consider if we're missing any representatives or have further needs.
Dana, besides Andrew, has it been determined who from this commission will be participating?
So that's a good question. I know there was a lot of interest, and I think we would plan to invite everybody to let you all know about those meeting times. I'm not sure that we had talked about having specific representatives. We can do that if you all want. It seems like there's a lot of interest, and so we probably want to keep the full group informed.
I think, is there like maybe, doesn't necessarily have to be a separate representative, but maybe in a checklist of representation of people and ideas within the group, a sub list that says like, are we covering the needs of differently abled people? Are we covering the thoughts and needs of people of color? Are we, because I think that piece is important as well, and not maybe get so stuck in like a monoculture. Not to say that you're doing that, but
I didn't come up with these things, you guys did.
yeah, but that's what I'm saying out loud. I know you really didn't do it. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Those are great points. Guiding kind of principles, really. Thank you. Ready to go into your other updates?
Sure.
All right, Haywood Streetscape. So I think you all at this point are familiar with this project to some extent. We're going to be rebuilding Haywood Street between Patton and Vanderbilt, rebuilding the street, I think primarily because MSD is going to be replacing sewer lines in the middle of the street. We're going to be replacing the sidewalks and the stormwater system, and there's also going to be some work taking place outside of the Haywood Street area, primarily sewer work, some water work. So over the past couple of months, we've had a number of meetings with the businesses and residents along the street. We also had 6 focus group meetings. The design review committee was one of those that we met with. We had 2 public meetings at the library in December, and we got a ton of feedback. And really, what we were looking at is major changes to the sidewalk and to the street itself, and where there could potentially be some sidewalk expansions. Of course, you would sacrifice parking by doing so. So we got a lot of feedback and a lot of feedback on both sides. But we are working with the engineer at this point to kind of reconcile that. We went over with the staff group last week all the input that we got and tried to work on an option that would feel comfortable and based on everybody's needs and concerns and ideas. So we're working on that. We're working on it pretty quickly. One of our next steps is to pull together those that will be directly impacted. I have a tentative date of February 1st, but we want to go over some of the possible construction phasing options. So we may be able to break the work up into 2 years and avoid some of those busier months. And we really need to hear from people if they would prefer that, or if we should try to go ahead and get this done. It's possible, we're saying about 9 months that the work would take, but it's possible it could take a year. So if we get going this spring, we're going to hit all of those busiest months. So we really need that feedback. And at that meeting, we're going to go over some of the other strategies we're working on related to mitigating some of these impacts. So we have some ideas for parking, and signage, and other things. And we know that there's a lot of interest in that. And so we're looking forward to working with the businesses and ADA, and certainly a representative from the local living economy working group on some of those issues. Questions about that project? Parking and transportation. So fines for parking infractions are going to be increasing on February 1st. If you all are aware of this, we got a recommendation of support for these changes from the Parking and Transportation Committee of this group. Basically, overtime parking is going to increase from $10 to $20, and loading zone violations will increase from $10 to $30. I know loading zones are a huge challenge, and so I think the idea is hopefully this can help them be managed a little bit better. And hopefully we'll see some improvements from this. So e-scooters, I know there's a lot of interest in this, and the city's multimodal and transportation commission held a workshop in December to talk through what some other cities are doing. I don't know if anyone in this group was at that meeting. I wasn't, unfortunately, but there's going to be additional public input opportunities soon, and then staff is going to be making recommendations to city council. So I'll make sure that, I don't know what format it'll be, a survey or what, but that you all have the opportunity to provide your input in this next step.
Sounds like it might move quickly. Do we need to be?
It feels like it's moving quickly, and honestly, I couldn't get the latest from our transportation department. I'll probably get an update later today. I know they had intended to initiate this wider public input around now in January, early in the year.
So we might want to, it's a February agenda item.
Sure.
We should all do our homework between now and then. Even looking at other cities. Solid other cities.
Were you gonna say something, Dave?
I was just gonna say, I have seen these in other cities, and I don't know what the feedback from other people's gonna be, but they seem to be like a real traffic hazard. Yeah, well,
I've noticed also in downtown, since the e-scooters were prevented by city council, I've noticed more and more people using skateboards downtown, which I thought were banned, and I was surprised that the city hadn't cracked down on that again.
Yeah, that hasn't changed. Yeah, regarding the scooters, there's a lot of examples in other cities of how it can be regulated and how that's working. Well, for people, I know it causes challenges, and enforcement on the scooter issues is a challenge, I know, for a lot of cities as well.
Are we looking at it in light of other things like skateboards?
It's a good
Or are we just
question.
focusing on e-scooters? 'Cause
I can't say specifically. I think it'd be good to have a transportation resource here to talk to you all.
Not to sound like a broken record, but our sidewalks aren't wide enough for people who have different abilities as well. So they just pose as a hazard at this point in terms of our infrastructure.
And that's one of the major questions. Some cities don't allow the scooters on sidewalks, but then again, it can be challenging to enforce. There are really interesting technologies that these scooter companies have where they can sometimes sense where the scooters are and slow them down if they're on a sidewalk. I don't know if they have those capabilities here, but that one is a huge issue. You're right, we have very narrow sidewalks. All right, just another reminder that we still have parking available. I just checked yesterday. There's about 65 spaces secured in this Cox Avenue lot that the city is leasing out on a monthly basis to people who need monthly parking. So there's still 25 or so spaces available.
I would encourage those of you, I'm sorry to interrupt, like the ABA and Megan, whoever, here, even to feel like we're doing a great job on our own to broadcast the availability of these. So, I hate for us to not think that parking is a huge demand simply because we took some action, but then we didn't really broadcast it very far. So, if you have a business organization, maybe let them know there are still some monthly spaces.
Yeah, there's about 35.
35 is.
The Street Tweaks project on Cox Avenue, some of you may have noticed or seen other updates that the paint used for the multi-use path has failed. So the Asheville bikes and volunteer teams have cleaned that up at this point, and they will respond to any continued issues. They have a response team that's on call. Mike Sewell, I checked in with him yesterday, and he would actually like to be able to come to the commission next week and provide you all updates.
Next week.
Or not next month, yes.
in a little bit about failing paint, because he had told us too, when he was here, that there was a different paint, I think it was a different meeting in this room. There was a different paint used for the particular tan color multi-use path. So the road was done in one material, this path was done in another, and that one pathway is what failed. It also took longer to cure, and had to go back and layer. So I don't want us to feel like the entire thing was a failure, but this one particular component of it was.
City-owned property redevelopment. So staff and our consultant team provided key findings to City Council in December, and staff intends to move ahead with soliciting development proposals for 319 Biltmore Avenue and 91 Riverside Drive this year. Additional due diligence in the form of operations and maintenance facilities assessment, and a relocation feasibility report will be performed for South Charlotte Street next year. Sorry, I'm reading this. The development vision for 319 Biltmore focuses on creating housing options with a range of affordability and improving connectivity for this growing area. That includes Lee Walker Heights. The vision for 91 Riverside Drive is to create artist housing and strengthen the character and economic vitality of the River Arts District. The request for proposals will outline minimum thresholds for affordable housing and other community benefits, and staff is going to be updating the Planning and Economic Development Committee of Council and Housing and Community Development Committees of Council in February.
So the relocation of Charlotte Street facilities is from 2020, did I get that right?
I think that's kind of a phase 2, is to explore that relocation.
But no action on that this year.
That's my understanding. Haywood Page redevelopment. So obviously we've been talking about this for a while. Staff and representatives from the community that participated in the Haywood Street Advisory Team had selected a consultant team to really translate that vision report into design options for the long-term use of these properties and really usher the community towards picking one of those options and deciding on a design for a long-term future for these sites. So, staff returned to the Planning and Economic Development Committee of Council in December, and they expressed support for moving forward and contracting with the consultants to do this work. They asked that we return to full council to get direction to be able to move forward and to prioritize funding. So staff is going to be going to City Council on January 22nd with this item, and I just want to make sure you all have a heads up on that.
Yeah, and if you're in support of Nelson Bird and Wallace being allowed basically to continue with their planning, we'd love to have people show up at the city council meeting and support this. So a lot of people showed up at the planning and economic development. I think it really helps. We need support at the city council meeting. So Darn, if you could let people know.
Should we endorse that resolution in favor of this? Would that help at all?
That's what we were wondering.
We'd be happy to pass that around.
Yeah, I think it would.
It's not.
You guys want to do this now?
Actually, sure. I mean, do you want to get your updates? You want to
Sure.
now?
Regarding temporary uses at 68 Haywood, we just put out a survey for those who have permits to do mobile food vending there. We've gotten several responses. That pilot program technically ended at the end of the year, so I'm excited to get this feedback to hear from them on really why it didn't seem to be very successful, because we didn't really see a lot of activity, which was disappointing. Visiting artist program. So art ecology was the proposal that was selected for this program. It's interesting. It involves the installation of various collages and community-generated pieces, kind of in block form, and I don't know how much that will change, but you should check out the proposal if you haven't yet. These are going to be installed in the Eagle Market area. It says in the proposal on the corner, but the exact locations haven't really been determined yet. But with the primary artist selected, the program moves into the next phase, which is engaging with a couple of local artists and with the community to really generate this work. And so throughout the course of this summer, our work is going to be co-created with the community and is planned for installation in the fall.
It's exciting.
It is exciting. It's awesome. programs were successful this year, and again, we were happy to partner with the ADA and with the Biltmore Village Merchants Association and the Oakland County Tourism Development Authority to expand the decorations both to Bridger Park and to Biltmore Village this year. Maintenance and repairs, our concrete crew is still working on the Collier sidewalk between Buxton and Southside. It's taking longer than we expected because the weather has held them up a bit. Downtown open office hours. Who all would you like at the next one, which is next week? Any of this? Not to say I can promise it, but any particular preference?
There's been some talk in the Civic Center on its board.
Okay. You have to come. Or I'll just get
Anybody else?
just-
Is that good? Any other suggestions? Do you want us to think about suggestions throughout the year and check?
Yeah, it's a great time to, kind of dive deep with particular individual departments on things. It's nice, and it's great here, it's sunny.
Well, when Deborah gets a little more situated,
Mhm.
should be a great one. As the budget gets closer, budget time. I bet people would love to hear about the grass and sod out front.
Parks is a good one, yeah. Alright, Rebecca. I think you all know, but I just wanted to know formally, Deborah Campbell, our new city manager, began in December, so I'm really excited to have her. And her previous role was assistant city manager for the city of Charlotte. And also just wanted to give you a heads up that there are some proposed noise ordinance changes that are coming to city council on January 22nd. So this is an item of interest for a lot of folks downtown. I don't have those materials, but they will be posted along with the council agenda, but just to save the date for that January 22nd council meeting.
The census has questions about noise ordinance, so I wonder if we should write, we'll be complete,
Check
as the
it.
census goes longer, but we could probably get some basic information to them. As far as input.
And
because
that
it was-
item came through the public safety committee, so I'm sure, if there are results that you all would want to share, I'm sure we can get that to council.
I thought the last thing that I heard on the noise ordinance updates was that the things that were proposed at public safety were not going to move forward at this time, like there was going to be more comprehensive look at the whole thing.
I thought that could be the case. I saw it on Maggie's agenda.
That was the last I had heard.
Yeah, it's slotted on the state week planning calendar to be on the January 22nd agenda. I believe the approach might be to look at making some changes now, but to acknowledge that there will be a phase 2 to work on some of the other issues that aren't addressed with this phase. But you probably may know more than me. With it being slotted on the agenda, I just want to be able to give people a heads up.
We did have, had 70 responses on the noise ordinance on the survey I kind of pulled up, and the biggest concern was they were concerned with amplified noise coming from businesses along the sidewalk, which makes me think of that one place on North Market that blares music into the sidewalk, and then it looks like the next one was the amplified noise from the back of vehicles, which actually might be the same business doing that.
So I was going to bring this up in the open, but since we're already there on the market and market and near Eagle and all that. So I've had community members come to me. Thank you, Dana. It's pretty disheartening that the police have been called, specifically for people of color who have business to do on Eagle and Market Street, being called suspicious individuals, specifically being called unorthodox people roaming and what's the word, loitering on the sidewalks. And so it's an uncomfortable conversation to have here, but it's my obligation to say, what is our role as we approve and not approve and look at buildings for new being built these are tenants that are calling in some of the new buildings, and also visitors. It's been more than once in the last 3 weeks. It's been on several occasions. So what is our role as a commission or somebody in some department to determine when areas are being rebuilt, AKA in some people's views gentrified, whatever the case may be, to really not fully then kind of racially profile citizens to then not have access to the very streets that they're accustomed to being on. I mean, it's ridiculous the number of times police have been called, specifically on Black people on Eagle and Market Street in the last 3 weeks.
We have a monthly meeting down on Eagle Market Street for all the neighborhood businesses there, and I've organized that group for over a year now. Dana generally comes to that meeting. I would appreciate if you would come to our next meeting and we can address that as a neighborhood issue.
Okay. One place to start, but I hear you on should the commission have greater responses?
Yeah, because it's part of it, you know, without getting into too many details, are people now reside in some of those apartments doing it. Some of them are people who are at the new facilities that are lodging visitors. And so it's a culture shift that's really targeting people of color to be like, you don't belong here, you shouldn't be on these streets. And it's being done very aggressively.
That really surprises me because this is something we have addressed in the neighborhood meetings. And in fact, we want more people of color participating in the block activities and down in the Triangle Park. And we have representatives from all those people come to these meetings. The YMI is generally represented.
It doesn't sound like they're the problem.
No, it's probably the new mountain housing apartments. It's probably, it could be the Foundry too. But I think I mean, we could start with the neighborhood association and see if people, because the Foundry also comes to the meetings, you know, and see what people in the neighborhood think about this as being an issue. Because that totally is contrary to everything that we have talked about in those neighborhood meetings.
I understand what you're saying, and at the same time, I just want to acknowledge and recognize that people have been hanging out and doing business and in relationship on the block for many, many years, and now having the police called on them for doing what they've been doing for years, and that is a problem, and it's a problem because of new buildings. So that's the reality of it.
Well, I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying we need to figure out what's going on before we can really do anything about it.
Sure. So
Right, that's what I'm bringing
having
up.
a neighborhood group talk about it is one place. Having this commission talk about it is another place. I would think, you know, learning staff as they are working through, even Sarah, doesn't she convene neighborhood groups? Sarah would be a great resource. I think we should get everybody talking about it.
That's why I brought it up, so thank you.
Yeah, Sarah also often comes to the meetings.
Yeah.
I think we also need to reach out to the police department and, you know, find out where these complaints are coming from. Is it the same officer that always, you know, reports? I think it's a deeper issue, and I do agree we need to get involved in it. But I think this is something that needs to be done sooner than later.
Yeah.
This is not good for our city as a whole.
Well, there will be a meeting later this month, and I'll invite you to the meeting, Kimberly.
Great, please do. And then maybe we have it as a February item. And I see Ms. Raines in the public out here, and she is the interim chief of down. I don't know your title, I'm sorry, but she's heading the downtown unit. So maybe it's something you could even do a little information scouring and bring us some information in February.
That'd be
That would be
great.
great. Thank you. Data, anything, an officer that deals with it often to come speak would be great. And let's just sit down and get on, and not just because of this one area that's suffering change, but because we're going to have more areas. Like let's.
Well, we may have already had areas, but it was unknown to us. But
Yeah.
now somebody said something to me, so I'm like, hey, let's shout it from the streets.
That's great. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so we have gotten through the updates from Dana. We are on to new business.
Do we do a motion?
Oh, we wanted to do a motion, right, in support of the 68 people. Does anybody have something they roll off in their head there, or is it go back to the? So this is the same ask as last year, the same funding ask?
It's the same funding ask, yeah. We
Remind me
have
how much it was, 300?
about either 320 or 322-ish, depending on if we need to redo a survey or something else.
So our motion would be along the lines of picking up where we left off and a reminder that this can't just continue to sit there forever. I mean, I guess it could, but what's the point?
So I can make a stab at it.
Go for it.
So based upon the Dana's little section here on the Haywood Page redevelopment, I move that this council support the continuing use of the consultant team led by Nelson Beard Wolves to complete the design options and final design plan based on the visioning report completed by the Haywood Street Advisory Team in 2017.
I'll second.
Yeah, I would like to make a friendly addition to that, which is basically to find the funds to pay the team. Because right now, they really don't have the funds budgeted.
What is that?
You know, I think it's a funding issue. And, you know, it was even mentioned that they could do it every 2 years, either 1 year or 2 years. So.
I thought support implied that, but
So we could tweak the language to say to go ahead and fund the initial contract.
Okay.
That motion get captured, so we've got a second, we've had some discussion. Any other
Second
discussion?
amendment.
Yeah.
Okay.
That went fast. That went right by me. So glad you recounted.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you.
Who's second for that?
I did. Okay, so we are on to new business. Before we dive into annual report and retreat planning, is there any other new business that isn't on here that we want to bring up? Just like to really just, any other issues?
I have a comment, I guess I would say.
We
There,
skipped that.
We skipped something?
Design review committee update. For some reason, I must have taken it off the last month and it didn't make it back on the agenda, so I'm sorry.
We're mid-sentence on something else. Can we
Sorry.
right back to that?
oh, it's just a comment. I've noticed that there is a real, a lot of graffiti activity happening in downtown right now. And I don't know that there's anything we can do about it, but it seems like APD should be aware of this and, you know, paying attention to what's happening in downtown. I mean, literally, all the buildings are getting hit, and places that haven't been hit in the past. And it's not like small graffiti, it's like huge graffiti.
I know I manage several parking lots and tenants downtown, and we were hit 3 times this week. What I will say is that APD does recommend, but they also need to be informed because they have greater issues to respond to. So the Asheville app is a great resource, and it's a very private function where you can photograph the tag and let them know, because if you've ever dealt with a long-term graffiti issue, the tags are held in a database, and then when the person is found, they can be charged for all of them, as opposed to just the one they were caught doing. So I recommend if anybody is being tagged to use that actual app to help inform the data, and you will, it's on the businesses now. There was a lot of activity a few years ago. It's on the business to cover it. So if you do not cover your graffiti within a short window of time, you will be fined. So I feel like I get the letters, so they know this, but if there is something going on that is heightened right now. There's also been some increased vandalism, mostly with signage and parking-related issues that I've been hearing about all week. So, you know, that's something maybe we'll talk about in other subcommittees. But I would, Asheville app, it seems very
Yeah, it just seems kind of unfair that, you know, the vandals are, you know, doing graffiti and damaging our buildings, but it's the business owners that bear the responsibility for repairing it. It just, you know, and it's, I know it's very difficult to catch these people, but, I mean, the APD is really the only resource we have for that, so.
And I think that was some council action from 4 or 5 years ago
Well,
to move
yes.
it back to the business. And I wonder, you know, sometimes when we're in this design review session of being a commission, we talk a lot about the importance of activation on the street. And why we talk about that is because you have eyes on the street. So I would say that the businesses that exist, we are the eyes on the street. We need to report.
Right, but if I were report, you know, if I use the Asheville app and report a graffiti, in a sense, I'm reporting on myself because I'm the one that's gonna have to fix it. What happened a few years ago with the city is the city actually they created a fund, I think $100,000 for businesses to use to get rid of graffiti on their buildings. And I took advantage of that on my buildings. And, you know, we got rid of the graffiti, and the $100,000 was very helpful for businesses to do that. Because, I mean, I do not have a graffiti item in my budget. You know, and if my building gets hit and I paint over the graffiti, there's nothing to prevent it from being hit tomorrow. I mean, and I can paint over it 100 times and it'll be hit with another graffiti 100 times. So, you know, it's like a, you know, Sisyphus here.
So I wonder if that is something we could also get some updates on the future agenda items. There are some kind of best practices and how quickly you cover it and the likelihood of it being repeated. I know I have a management building that is in a really isolated spot and kind of protected by trees, but when you drive up a certain road, you can see it. And the tags were larger than this room for years, and we would paint it and come back next day and we paint it and come back. But after a few months of being diligent, stop, because then they're wasting their money and their time. So maybe we can review some best practices and have some kind of business outreach.
Well, and I just want to add to what you're saying. Graffiti tag culture really doesn't have anything to do with specific vandalism, as it has more to do with like graffiti counterculture and like art and or group kind of wars in terms of their art expression. So I hear what you're saying, but at the core of it, you know, I'm going to say something kind of radical. You know, what if 2 times a year there was a fund where the buildings could cover their well, like large rolls of canvas where there's an invitation for graffiti artists to come out and to tag buildings on the canvas, and then that could remove this whole need for like unwanted graffiti. So it's a really radical idea, but it's also not really about vandalism as much as it's about like artist turfs wars. Just saying.
I think unique ideas are probably going to be part of the solution no matter what. So, and how we have it. But Dane, how can we support you in your concern?
Well, I don't know. Like I said, it's really more of a comment than a call to action because it's already illegal. You know, if the APD catches somebody, they will prosecute them. And that has happened several times, I know of. The only thing I can think of is, you know, if it continues, the city might consider doing another program like they did a few years ago where they have a fund. You know, if it comes to council's attention, or your representative, you know, that's something, $100,000 got rid of a lot of graffiti in downtown. And, you know, I think business owners, if you have $100 to pay for painting your building, that the city is gonna, you know, pay for it, and that was a big help. So that's the only thing I can think of, other than having APD be vigilant about that's about it, all I can think of.
I see lots of jackets. Cool. Okay, any other topics before we get back to design review?
I'm not sure what Kim just said when I was addressing that.
Those were great.
Do you want to say it again?
Well, I was just going to say that in the past, we had heard mentioned when I talked with the graffiti artists and stuff, that they had proposed that we provide some sort of stage where it will last.
Yes, pretty much what I'm saying, because it's not about vandalism and to put criminal charges against artist expression. I think there's a better solution. I really do.
We do currently have that. We have the entire valley area is open for graffiti. And there's famous possibilities down there, but it still doesn't inhibit graffiti on the adjacent buildings that we're responsible for. So
Well, maybe we need to create a graffiti trail, like a graffiti map, where people know where to do it.
That sounds cool.
Just saying.
There's been some alley map talk that we do. But, you know, there's Mountie is down the river, right? So we don't really have one downtown.
right, but there's Burners Barbecue where those entire warehouses get painted all on the weekend. There's
Sounds like a great.
open invitation to graffiti nonstop all day, every day down there.
like we had left off the updates and currently, but is there a design review committee update?
Yes. Stephen Lee wasn't there. We saw very preliminary plans for a mixed-use development adjacent to the Masonic temple that would span between Broadway and Market. It includes a hotel element, very limited condo, and very limited workforce housing and some retail.
Any indication of like number of units or?
I don't remember.
Under 30.
Under 30 or 130?
Under 30.
Under 30.
For
Combo.
condos and just under 10 for workforce. And I don't remember the hotel element.
100,000.
It was a big number. It was
a big,
It was
over
around.
100, yeah, for the hotel portion.
So they're coming back to design review or you?
Yes, it was very preliminary.
At some point, I don't think next week, but
Is there anything on for next week?
Yes. Yeah. go ahead.
So yeah, for next week, we've got, one project, there's a lot on Banks Avenue, actually, that's a vacant lot. That someone's looking at building a modest building, like a 4 to 5 story building. There's step backs included in that for, I think it's residential with retail on the bottom. It's not huge, it's a pretty small building. I think the Flatiron, in anticipation of coming to your February meeting, is those folks are the design team's trying to figure out what to bring you in terms of views and context, because, they're leaving most of the building the exact same. So they've got some questions. I think they want to come to the committee. I'm not sure that's the right venue, but they are doing a rooftop addition. So I think they're going to bring some sort of illustrations of that to you. And then there was something else.
Well, just as a heads up on Flatiron dates, so that it's clear. So Downtown Commission, February 8th. It would then go to Planning and Zoning on March 6th. And the soonest it could go to City Council is March 26th.
And I went to the TRC meeting for Flatiron, and if they recommended, Jessica recommended they come back again.
Right.
So they may or may not, it was depending on if they chose to make changes. So if they went back again, we might see it
It's returning to TRC.
It has to, right?
on February 4th, so we'll still see it on 8th. Interesting, and then, just to clarify, because there's been some confusion on what we might be reviewing, and it was thought for some time that we would just be reviewing the changes to the streetscape around it, and now I understand we're reviewing the entire project, right?
Yes and no. I mean, and we will provide more clear direction in the staff report. I think, yes, the project's coming to the Downtown Commission. Do we need to talk about the existing building? Probably not, right? I mean, it's staying the same. HRC, Historic Resources, actually reviewed that building because it's a local landmark, and they approved the changes, the proposed changes. Now, as a part of that proposed changes, there's this rooftop addition that HRC did weigh in on. I didn't know that was happening, but so I think you all look at that. Any changes to the street?
Wasn't the building changing in that, an entire channel of units was being removed for a new elevator system?
Right, you don't review interiors.
Okay, but that is,
I mean, the commission's really just looking at the exterior, so. But if you.
well, that was like fire and life safety, that's what.
Right. That's-
But there could be a separate agenda item to talk about the nature of use and its impacts. So just being clear about separate.
Is the building on the National Registry or just, so I thought with the National Registry, you couldn't change the exterior skin.
So there's a huge National Register district in downtown. There's a lot of buildings on the National Register. It really doesn't mean a whole lot.
So
What it-
it's
Well,
not.
let me think. So what it means is that if you rehab your building within the Secretary of Interior guidelines, you have the chance to get tax credits. Local landmarks are a higher designation. Those are what Historic Resources is over. So like this building's a local landmark, but what it means is HRC has kind of the jurisdiction to look at any changes to those buildings. It doesn't mean you can't ever change those buildings.
Right, but does will HRC
They already voted.
They already voted and approved. They approved.
Back in September,
So
October.
they own the air rights, do you know, to that building?
You know, maybe let's talk about that argument in front of us, since we don't have them here, and it just seems like we're kind of out of order here,
But what, I guess the long and short of it is that staff will be, try to really help the commission understand the review process and what you're reviewing. Because it's, I know I've said this a million times, maybe you've heard me say it, but in terms of integrity of process, it's really important that your vote is about what you're supposed to be voting on and not do you like hotels or not.
which is a great segue.
So the idea that we will, I think, we've talked with the chair, I feel very strongly we should have an agenda item on that meeting that you all can then look at the impact of a hotel in downtown. It's a separate agenda item. And then you can feel free to speak freely about it, and then those comments go on to council. Because that is part of your job, is to advise council about impacts to downtown.
So I would like to ask for more of that, because I think about the 40 to 50 year impact on any building. I know we're here to review the building, but what's happening for community, and as community changes, there's all these cultural things that shift that we're not accounting for in a physical structure, yay or nay. And so having a place that's structured within our meetings to, actually comment on the overall impacts or ask questions about the overall impacts that go on to city council would be extremely useful to me.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
You're hitting on exactly what the goal is. I think you've missed your calling as an urban designer. So one of the things we're talking about doing is just having a different discussion unrelated to the approval of a particular project, so that we can send our input on those kind of impacts and whatever other impacts we might be experiencing to council that might inform land use zoning changes or video changes that, much like we did.
Employment.
Right. So I think that's something we need to know is coming in February. And you're going to be intentional about telling us today so that everybody can put their thinking hats on and come back in February ready to have a robust conversation about lodging use in downtown, whatever that might mean or feel or imply or impact in overall. That focus, those things, I think you're right. And what Sasha's getting at is that we are restricted in what we look at in designs. Does it meet everything on the list? Check, check, check. Yes. And in some instances, in design review in particular, that's all we're supposed to be doing.
Yes.
So it makes it really complicated, especially like with the planning board and council, to have those conversations, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't happen. So we just gotta somehow get the two things going.
So there's the next downtown commission meeting where there'll be the flat iron and then the separate agenda item. We're gonna look in a minute at the possible agenda for the retreat. So we also have a place there to talk about lodging and its impact. So up to you all on in that February meeting, if you want to talk about flat iron specifically or get started with this lodging discussion generally. Just thinking about kind of those two opportunities to have the conversation.
And also where the order on that agenda will be interesting. We have that robust conversation before we review their project, correct?
No,
After.
yes,
It's an interesting
that would seem kind of biased.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned it. Yeah.
Where
Now
are
that
we
you're
getting? Where are we?
We are at.
I'm a Robert's rule kind of freak, and I don't know where we are.
We're in your business.
I'm sorry, but a couple things came to my mind about the design review that I just wanted to add. Sorry to backtrack.
Now we're somewhere else on the agenda.
I'm sorry. But just a couple of the things that the committee discussed with the developer, the designers. One was we would like to see the numbers for the condos and the workforce bumped up. And another important thing brought up was, since this would span the whole block between Broadway and Market, that there would be some pedestrian access through the site, since there's really nowhere else along there to allow pedestrians to come through. So those were the things we suggested to the developer.
Is there any mention of how to use the ground floor?
It's, it's slated as retail.
Okay, So we are looking at February 15th for tree planting. There is a draft agenda, and this is, we need to confirm time and attendance.
So we have, at this point, we're planning for Friday, February 15th from 8:30 to 1:30. Are there any major conflicts, or does that time work? Yes.
That's amazing.
For location, I reached out to the Arts Council to see if we could use space there. Their gallery is available. Before securing that, I just want to check to see if anyone has other ideas somewhere in the South Slope. I am looking at Utopia.
I would love if the retail space was, or event space I can find, was going to be ready by then.
Yeah,
But I don't think it's going to quite be
Okay.
ready, so for future.
Future, that's great.
The kitchen's done, fully up and operational, but we're still not done on the other side.
I don't know if you've thought about this, but I would love to see us go to the YMI.
To have the meeting there, is that what you mean?
There's a lot of talk about the South Slope Vision Plan. I thought that was why we ended up with the South Slope. I can tell with that too.
and that is true. Let's run through it and think about that.
Because isn't there a walking tour component?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we have us going over the annual report, which we're hopefully going to be kind of finalizing today, and the 2-year strategic planning items that you all had identified last January, just kind of recapping what we've done, where we are, where we're going in the year ahead. Kind of update any of those if we need to, including continuing this logic policy discussion and how the commission wants to work on that or comment on that. I figure also talking about the roles of the committees, so looking back at what those identified priorities are and kind of thinking about how the committees might work towards achieving some of those goals in the year ahead. We then thought of moving toward the South Slope Vision Plan and giving you all updates on that and some of the draft recommendations that we're working on, and specifically focusing on the local economy aspects and also encouraging residential development, because I know that's a priority for you all. So looking at some of the tools, zoning and other things that could support that, and having some focused time to work on those 2 areas. We have, I don't know if we've actually talked with them yet, but talked about having the Planning and Zoning Commission join, probably for part of that zoning discussion related to the draft plan, but then also taking a walk through South Slope and continuing to discuss those opportunities and recommendations. And then kind of wrapping up to talk about a possible fall retreat and potentially a joint retreat with the Planning and Zoning Commission. Do you have anything to add, Sasha?
The only thing that really jumps out at me is that it's great that we're focusing on South Slope so much. I don't want it to deter us from also focusing on the entire downtown. So when I see how can we fit 1,000 new residences in South Slope, it's a really exciting conversation, but I also want to go back to what we hit on last year, which is how do we get additional residential downtown throughout downtown. And that might be that, we don't just limit it to the South Slope Vision Plan, or we talk about it in another area of the agenda, but there's other things in there like the affordable housing and group and HCD, and then talking about the EG, the land use incentive grant, and how that might play into increasing housing. And there's some other things that we might want to talk about that are limited to just South Slope.
So I think we thought the South Slope Vision Plan could be a really good opportunity to work on some specific recommendations that, yes, would be in the context of South Slope, but could also apply to downtown as a whole. And I mean, especially, I think for housing development, but also for local businesses and supporting the local economy. Like, there could be some site-specific recommendations, but it's also just getting into some of the specific tools and laying that out, which in my mind would apply for all of downtown, but it's just through the lens of this South Slope plan, just because it's an opportunity for that. It kind of gets us thinking about this second section of the downtown master plan updates, because that would be probably similar tools related to zoning.
So piggybacking on the 1,000 new residents and also Kimberly's comments, is there going to be any report on the input from the Southside community
working on, we're working on, hopefully by then we will have more. I mean, we didn't have as much representation from Southside as we wanted in that process. Yashika Smith, who's our new outreach officer, I would say, with our equity office, is really working closely with folks in the community, and she and I have met once. We need to follow up and really want to make sure that that community knows what's going on, but also feels like what is in the recommendations makes sense and get their feedback on it before it goes into a full draft.
Like that community at the forefront of developing or helping development. And then I know that you've had a lot of community input on the walls.
Mhm.
Is there going to be any report of what that was?
Sure, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, we've typed up a lot of it. I just haven't put it out there.
One other thing that we had in the past was that spreadsheet of what housing do we have in downtown, when was it built, and it would be great to update it. I'm not sure if anything's happened since then, but maybe.
Yeah.
Eagle Street, maybe. Okay. So an update on our existing housing makeup downtown. Anything else, Joe? And when we get together, we can still, it's not too late to send data ideas or adjust as we get closer. We have about 5 weeks. Unless we're going to request data, which they might need to.
Or if there are changes.
Well, thinking with the residential is something I keep trying to think about is you keep talking about livability and maybe a discussion on what that includes, what kind of use you need in the downtown to really have livable neighborhoods.
Yes, we definitely heard a lot from folks and the public input around, for that area specifically, but we know it probably holds true for downtown, but even down there, that we know it's a food desert, right? People want access to everyday services, especially if you want those residents to come and not force people to have a car to go to Ingles on Taunton Road.
And I think that's for all downtown.
Yes, it is. But if you're in the core, you have maybe a few, you could maybe go to Hobie, or maybe you could go to the co-op and get by, but if you're down south, down there, there's nothing. So, I mean, I guess there's a gas station or two.
Yeah.
That's what you got.
In addition to that, if we could expand that discussion, so that are all the things that make a good
Yes.
neighborhood.
And we're about to talk about our framework. So the framework is in your agenda too. This is what we had done for, looks like last year is what we're talking about, the 2-year plan. So all these things that we're talking about are still on there. So it might be good for us in our retreat to really assess, like, with these for great goals, could we tackle them? And if we're not able to tackle all the goals we put out, then should we strategize and reduce our goals and really set some intentions we can achieve? I'm, for one, not a big fan of just creating dream documents. So maybe if we can, between now and next week or so, for sake of timing and planning, kind of look that over and think about what we might recommend. We really focus on those second year and our 2-year plan. Okay. We are going to be running out of time here soon. So anything else about retreat planning?
The agenda is so full, I'm just wondering if we've set aside enough time.
We usually do.
I think we were, in that meeting we had with Sage, we were concerned that people will start leaving us. We make it too long. I know that you all are taking time out of your lives, so may I get feedback on the time is well.
And I do think, something we don't do too often is if we have a topic that is really pointed and needs some additional discussion, we can always have a special meeting. One mid-year planning retreat, you wouldn't do those things, right? I do agree that it's already 5 or 6 hours. We might wear ourselves thin. And then to try and add in the planning part too and schedule around that.
Do we know if they're interested? Do you know yet? I don't. Okay. So we'll look into that. If they don't join us, it'll probably be a little bit sooner.
And are we having facilitation?
Steph is going to be
Steph is
there,
there.
and Sasha's
Okay.
going to be there, and I'll be there.
Great.
I'm not sure who else, but yeah, Steph is up for it. She's awesome.
Great. Got her. Okay.
guess I'll speak up. Feel free to join in. Both Sage and Franzi agreed to continue as chair and vice chair respectively, so thank you for that. We did not get any other nominations, although it's not too late if anybody wants to nominate somebody or nominate yourself. So we have only 2 candidates, so I don't really feel the need to have elections unless somebody disagrees.
Just approve continuation.
Could we have a motion to approve?
Well, I guess I'll get a motion. I move that we continue Sage as chair and Franzi as vice chair for another year.
Second.
Discussion.
Call the question.
Can we hurry up?
Sorry, I didn't think I was
Where are
supposed
we
to
on the
speak.
agenda? All right.
Sage is looking for somebody else.
All right, I'll
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, I appreciate that. And I said this to the nominating committee via email, but if y'all have any input on how I as chair can help us get through processes, or if there's something I can do better to assist us in this group, let me know. You can reach out to me individually. I love the feedback. It's been fun. I appreciate, Franzi, you sticking with me and vice chair.
Yeah, I'm honored. It's great.
It's great. Okay. We won't take up more of your time. Annual report.
Okay, so I printed 5 copies. I didn't want to print a copy for everybody. It's a lot of paper. There's also a digital draft online link to your agenda.
Okay.
But,
Okay. Here's one. And I think I'm gonna be able to get it.
do you want me to put it up here?
Sure.
Yeah.
That's what else. I've got 2017 here if you feel like you need, there's 3 copies of 2017 if you feel like you need something to reference from last year. Dana, I think you did a great job. One of the things that stuck out to me was that we had reviewed 9 projects. Last year we reviewed, for 2017, we reviewed 6. We reviewed 1 every other month. This was 9 projects. And I did know that, it might be worthwhile to add the projects that we almost came to us or that came to design review but didn't come to us, like the Parisian residences is a good one. Wasn't sure if there were some others, but it tells the story of what's been in the pipeline. And
Are those public record? I'm always curious about them. When you see something in the subcommittee, is that?
It is, I mean, if somebody doesn't leave drawings with staff, then I have nothing to, if they request something from me, I can't give it to them, but, yeah, I mean, anybody can attend those meetings.
I mean, are there drawings of like
are the meeting minutes.
the subcommittee, the things that happen there that involve public knowledge or do you?
It's a
or
publicly
co-presiding
posted meeting,
those?
so anybody can come, anybody can request what happened there, yes.
It would be interesting to have them minutes. That might be really hard in that forum, but I just wonder,
It's more about money and capacity.
money and capacity, because by the time it gets here, we're hearing updates from y'all. There's a larger committee that's working on it. Are we hearing everything all the time? I think that, sometimes it's been a while, like we just had, I remember this now.
I have like 2 hours of thoughts on design review. And it might be worth a special meeting in a few months, like 6 months, to talk about changing the process. Rivers, looking at their process and changing it. And so now I'm talking too much, but we would love to align the 2 processes and improve them both. So I think there's time at this retreat, but in the future, the design committee's also talking about it and maybe bring something together.
Okay, so as for the annual report, like the 9 projects, they're pretty straightforward.
Yeah, we have the design review projects and then the items you all commented on may have resulted in some action or council discussion.
Part of me wanted the design reviews of the pictures and stuff to be at the end.
Okay.
Simply because, it's all catchy and pretty, and then when you look at the activities, it seems like we did mostly that, or more of that. Because we've talked about a lot of things. feel about them just being bullet points versus more information about what came of it? To discuss these things is a very important.
The discussion points are available in the meeting minutes, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think it's good for a report because it can reference back.
Yeah, they're gonna have a lot of stuff to review.
Oh, you think actually read it? So, okay.
No, I think the point is like, council gets so much.
Yeah. I didn't really read it,
It's scalable, isn't it? It's easy.
but, you know, one thing, I guess I was looking at like how I might use the document and looking at historical information. I wonder, and this is something maybe I could do, not to give y'all something to do, but we could attach the dates of whenever these were talked about. Like, how do we, if we know we talked about visiting artist program, that's great, but like what did we, when, you know, how many?
I could have the months, and I just went through the agendas.
I hate to give you more work, but I can do it too.
One thing I did do is link, and I don't know if this is color, but, link to all of the design projects, so when you click on one of the projects, it takes you to the project materials.
So maybe these could just link to the physical.
Sure.
That might be best. That's cool. Yeah. Because it's just about looking back, you know, if we talk about holiday decorations in 5 years, we might ask ourselves, what did we do last time?
So it's a beautiful paper trail. I love it.
Yeah. So I think the last section is important for today too, but of course I don't want to, you guys have more comments. But, so this was included in last year's report. This basically was the last page. And I think we have a retreat as an opportunity to come up with comments for council's retreat. I think we planned for the end of February or March. But we have to turn in this physical document at the end of January. So just wanting to know if you want to, this is what you submitted last year. Do you want to change any of that? Is there anything else you want to share with the council at this point as part of this document? This first one.
Those are the big three.
And then, of course, we can submit something that you all work on at the retreat.
Yeah. I guess you know, I keep trying to remind ourselves that our big push was we wanted that explosion of residential population coming up. We wanted to all look back and feel like that happened.
Yeah.
And that was, yes, and I don't really see that represented here. I mean, in conjunction with planning and zoning, kind of that, but I wonder if that,
Added like some,
well, are we supposed to only do 3? Is there, okay, so then we should add something about that. And I might even say that the order there listed in suggestion of priority, and I wouldn't say that the budget for a Hayward and Page is my top priority. But I don't know if we need to list them in order or not.
up to you guys.
I don't know if this is even appropriate, because I just don't know, you tell me. I'm struggling because I don't see like our existing residents in this, and I'm wondering how we can fold in like a place-based, this is, I don't even know what to say about it, I'm just seeing a lot of shift, change, and move, but all that shift, change, and move impacts people who live here. And so how do we fold the evaluation or consideration of impact in residents and all community members instead of always pushing forward? I feel like we're gonna pump the brakes for a second.
I think that's a great question to pose to the group, so.
It tends to, it leads towards what Pam was saying too about livability, which is factoring like how we currently live downtown.
And what does exposed to residential growth mean for existing residents?
Right.
I'm nervous, this 3 makes me nervous, because I'm like, where are
Yeah.
we in this and our other neighbors?
And, you know, that's kind of the premise behind what we did in the census, like what's the climate for businesses, but what's the climate for the residents? And what's it like to live downtown? So, how do we put this into recommendations for council? Is it not,
Yeah, I almost feel like it's a me, it's about placemaking, livability.
Livability, that's a great word.
And I would suggest it be our first one. I
You
mean,
know, and, you know, I think we worry too much about lodging proposals. You know, I look at corporations that want to invest in our city. Is that really so bad? Because they do provide jobs for people. They do provide places. They make downtown more livable because you have more people downtown. I understand there needs to be, you know, a system of you know, a place for everyone. But I think we're putting too much emphasis on, we don't want any new development, we don't want any new lodging. But I don't know how to
Let's save that, maybe
do
for
that.
the working session, but if we can come up with it, I will work with Sage to finalize the exact words of this, because it just needs to be done by the end of the month. But if we will come up with a statement on placemaking and livability.
You know, to me, that seems like part of your bullet item 4 there. I mean, if we're gonna encourage more housing in downtown, which what we agreed to last year, I mean, really part of that is livability. Because I mean, I've read studies that you need at least 5,000 residents to have a viable community. And, you know, we're nowhere near 5,000 now. I mean, we're probably around 1,000, you might guess. So if we're gonna shoot for, you know, really increase, you know, residents in downtown, part of that has to be infrastructure support in terms of, you know, just regular stores like grocery stores and drugstores, you know, just the kind of stores that people will need to have. In particular, I believe South Slope is, you know, we do have a couple of options in downtown that are totally out of reach for most people. But if you start building up South Slope, there's nothing down there. So really, livability and housing, I think, go together.
There's lots of statistics about, you know, how many people you actually need to support a grocery store. And it's almost like 20,000 people. I mean, that's a lot to support a grocery store.
I can tell you, but these are all kind of retreat things, right?
Yeah.
So right now, what
We
we're trying
wanna
to do is,
include it in
yeah,
something.
but livability is covering a lot of things, but let's not continue.
And on the 2018-2019 work plan, livability is a major topic, so it's good that it's still standing to be a major priority. We'll continue to work on that, but Sage and I will work on it first. But it is-
Any other ones that aren't on the list currently or haven't been mentioned? Anything that needs to come off?
And we will send the final draft around if anyone has any major issues with it. We can make tweaks.
I mean, I almost feel like that last one is kind of just to be fair, but it's kind of understood, right?
Council did refine the policies on lodging, so that's kind of been accomplished.
So we could get rid of it almost.
But it sounds like you guys want to make more recommendations.
It was way.
We might, but, that's up, yeah, it's up to you to take it off or leave it.
Okay, so it sounds like that's staying on. It sounds like we're adding placemaking, livability, supporting.
This is just reinstating
Okay.
the support for
What about,
residential.
I guess livability might cover some of what you were referring to earlier.
It's all the socio, and just the neighborhood stuff, like, you know, how our decisions for growth and urban development actually impact how people live. Like, it's a huge thing. It's gigantic.
We'll work on the perfect last bullet point, see.
Anything else? We'll keep working on it, we'll circulate it. Thank you. Okay, that leaves us at public comment. We're actually only 6 minutes off of our agenda. Okay, so public comment, 10:21. Would anyone like to speak? I'm all done at once. Okay, public comment is closed at 10:21. We kind of already talked about informal discussion of future agenda items. Any other things? Okay. I know Toby hates it, but I'll motion to adjourn.